June of the year 1816. According to the calendar, this should have been the warmest time of the year. But in many parts of the world, people woke up with the feeling that something was wrong. The sky was grey, as if covered by a thin veil. The light was weak and cold, carrying none of the familiar warmth of the sun. The air felt more like late autumn than summer, and in that moment, no one knew they were stepping into a year that would forever be remembered by a strange name. The year without a summer. At that time, human life depended entirely on nature. There were no weather forecasts, no satellites watching the sky. The sun was the guiding signal for all daily activity. But in 1816, that signal seemed to drift off course. Spring arrived late and colder than usual. Rare sunny days quickly disappeared behind thick layers of cloud. Farmers stood in their fields each morning, looking up at the sky with fragile hope that warmth would return. But day after day, the sky remained silent. Then something completely unexpected happened. In the middle of summer, snow fell not once, but repeatedly, as if the sky had forgotten its own rules. In Switzerland, mountain slopes that were normally white only in winter glowed again with fresh snow in July. In France and Germany, mornings began with thin frost clinging tightly to leaves, causing newly formed shoots to wither. In North America, people in the New England region were stunned to see thin ice forming on lakes in June, something that should not appear until many months later. Summer still arrived, but in a distorted form, carrying the cold of winter and the quiet of nature. The abnormality was not only in the cold, but in the rhythm of the weather. Rare warm days appeared and vanished too quickly, never long enough for crops to recover. Prolonged cold rain made the soil heavy and lifeless. Weak sunlight caused growth to almost stop. The fields did not fully die, but they did not truly live either. They stood still, trapped between two seasons, between hope and disappointment. As the cold stretched from one week to the next, the consequences began to spread. Grain failed to ripen before the next cold wave arrived. Many fields were abandoned because harvesting brought nothing. Food reserves were quickly depleted. Livestock lacked feed and grew thinner with each passing day, not because of disease, but because nature no longer provided what they needed. The change in climate triggered a chain reaction in human life. Food prices rose day by day, not because of greed, but because supplies were becoming increasingly scarce. Meals that were once sufficient were reduced to small portions, repeated again and again. Children and the elderly were affected most clearly. Society as a whole entered a state of quiet tension, where each meal was not only about nourishment, but also a question about tomorrow. A vanished summer did not only take away warmth, it also shook the human sense of security. When the weather no longer followed familiar patterns, trust in the stability of the world began to crack. And in the year 1816, people clearly felt for the first time that even a small change in the sky was enough to overturn all life on the ground. Alongside scarcity, a silent fear began to spread. In many European cities, crowds gathered in front of food stores, talking and worrying. Rumors appeared everywhere. Some believed the sky had changed forever. Others thought this was a sign of a dark period approaching. Churches filled with people praying. Bells rang during grey, cold afternoons, like a reminder that humans were powerless before nature. When science could not yet provide answers, fear found its own voice. Only many years later did people gradually connect the pieces of the truth. The sun had never disappeared from the sky. It was still there, shining as before, but its light had to pass through an obstacle unlike anything before. Not long before 1816, a massive eruption in Southeast Asia pushed an enormous amount of ash and fine dust high into the atmosphere, so high that ordinary rain could not wash it down. These tiny particles did not fall back immediately. They remained suspended in the air for many months, even years, and were carried across the earth by strong high-level winds. Slowly, a thin but vast veil formed around the planet. This veil did not block the sky completely, but it was enough to weaken the sunlight reaching the ground. Daytime still had light, but that light was paler, colder, and no longer strong enough to provide the same warmth as before. As the amount of sunlight decreased, the global average temperature also fell, even if only by a few degrees. But for a climate system that is highly sensitive, this small change created large consequences. Summers became short and unstable. Cold spells appeared during what should have been the warmest periods. Frost returned at times no one expected. Crops, which depend on steady light and stable temperatures, no longer had the conditions needed to grow normally. Not only the land was affected, the oceans also absorbed less heat, altering currents and weather patterns in many regions. Rain arrived at the wrong times. Monsoon systems fell out of rhythm. The entire global climate system was like a finely tuned machine shifted by just one misplaced gear. Yet the consequences spread everywhere. The most troubling aspect was the duration. The dust layer in the atmosphere did not fade quickly. It remained long enough to cause a series of consecutive failed growing seasons. That is why the year 1816 is remembered not only as a cold year, but as a moment when the world realized that nature could reshape human life through a single event occurring far away in a place most people had never seen. When 1816 passed, the world was no longer the same. Many people left their homelands in search of regions that were easier to live in. Farming methods were adjusted to adapt to unpredictable climate conditions. In European culture, darker and colder stories began to appear more frequently, reflecting the lingering unease people had experienced. A vanished summer left a deep mark in the collective memory of humanity. The year without a summer stands as a quiet reminder. If the light of the sun weakens even slightly, the familiar world can become unfamiliar. People in 1816 felt this clearly as they looked up at grey skies and waited for a summer that never arrived. And even today, that story still leads us to ask a difficult question. If it happened once before, could it happen again?